who is an award-winning author of the nonfiction books Murder and Mayhem and Forensics for Dummies, a bunch of stuff like that, Q&A periods. Just did some fabulous workshops for writers. So we're going to get some quick questions and answers from him because he can answer it a lot better than I can sum up what he told us. So thank you for this.
Glad to be here.
All right. I want to start with the first workshop you did today was an autopsy of a thriller.
Right.
And you chose to use The Terminator as an example, the movie.
Yes.
All right. And can you tell me briefly why you chose to do that? Why that movie?
Oh, it's probably the perfect thriller. It hits on all the right notes. It's sci-fi, of course. It has one of the great character arcs in the history of movie making with Sarah Connor, where she turns from a soft, not very bright young lady into a true warrior. The science fiction involved in it is fascinating, in that she's the mother of the savior of mankind and that kind of thing. The Terminator,
thinking about it'll make you crazy.
Exactly, and the Terminator, played by the governor of California, Arnold, and he did a great job. It's almost like he was born to play that character. James Cameron did the movie, who was a great director. The dialogue, the videography, everything about it was very good. But main thing is the storytelling. Hit on all the points. It was the rising tension, it was the cutting off of options, it was increasing pressure on Sarah to force her to respond and indeed mold her into what she became. So it's, as far as movie making go, it's the perfect thriller.
Okay. And one of the things that makes it the perfect thriller is the huge character arc of Sarah Connor.
Absolutely.
So now you also briefly touched on, for series authors who have main characters,
right.
You don't want them to change that much during each book, or you can't. Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
Well, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. I get asked this question a lot, and I know Lee Child does too, who writes the Jack Reacher books. If you're going to write 20 books about a character, you can't have them becoming an entirely different person through each book, because they have to go through 20 metamorphoses.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they're not the same person. And people read Lee's books because they love Jack Reacher, and they don't want him to change. They want him to be challenged. They want his belief systems to be challenged and his methods to be challenged, but they don't want Jack to change.
Right.
They want him to be the same person always. That's why they read the books.
All right, because they love the character.
Yeah, and James Bond, same way. James Bond never changed.
Right. And you said there was a couple other ones like that too, with the James Lee Burke's character and
Dave Robicheaux stays more or less the same.
Michael Connelly's
Harry Bosch stays more or less the same. I mean, they have little things and they have challenges that challenge their belief systems, but the character really doesn't fundamentally change to a different person. Right.
And now you touched on that about changing the characters in the second workshop with the psychology, saying that the who they are or what they want or what they need is a little too simple,
right,
to build a truly three-dimensional character.
Right.
You need to go more to who the core of they are.
Exactly.
Okay, now can you maybe give us a quick tip on the best way to dig into that for ourselves, to get to the core? Like, what's an example, like that firehouse example?
Well, for instance, there is one of the examples I use is a woman, the house catches on fire, and she gets two of her children out. The third one's left in the house. The house is burning. The neighbors are gathered in the front yard. The fire department's still 15 minutes away. What's she going to do? Is she going to run back into the house and risk her own life and maybe orphan her two children that are safe and sound outside to get the third one? Or is she going to do what mothers are socially and genetically programmed to do, save the child?
Right.
And risk her own life to do so? Different characters will respond differently to that. It's what's called a double approach avoidance conflict.
Right.
The conflict is, if you do one thing, there's a good and a bad. That is, don't go save the child. She wins in that she's alive and she raises her other two children. There's a negative in that she loses the child. If she goes in to save the child, there's a win if she saves the child, but there's a lose if both of them die. And so those are the types of conflicts that major storytelling comes from. Those massive conflicts where there are two mutually exclusive choices and both have good and bad.
It's not a win or lose situation.
They're mutually exclusive.
Right.
She either goes in or she doesn't. She either saves the child or she doesn't. That's what causes characters to change, those decisions, because the decision she makes at that point in time will change her forever.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so that
Jack Reacher would just run into the house.
and not be changed by
and not be changed at all.
Exactly. All right. So that's also what you would call that a conflict zone, is where they have to decide what they're in between.
And that's the zone where, as you approach one thing, one decision, the negatives suddenly rise up and push you away. And so you go to the other one and the negatives rise up and push you away. It's like a tennis match. And that conflict can last for seconds or years.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So you also had something really interesting that I want to get you to talk about a little bit too, is how we're all living our own movies.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've never really thought about it that way. Do you think that, well, obviously not just writers, but are living their own movies, but day-to-day people, they just don't think of that, right?
Well, yeah, and people will call me and say, well, I have this thing and I need your opinion on something. You know, I'm not sure what to do about this. And I always end up saying, well, it's your movie. How do you want to write the script? How do you want it to come out? What do you think is the right thing to do? What do you think you should do? What are you capable of doing? And what will you feel comfortable with after the fact? It's your movie. You get to make that decision. You know, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? That's up to you. But the person will decide based on who they are, how they see themselves, what their skills are, what their needs, what their fears are, and how they want the outcome to be. But it's their movie. Everybody lives their own movie.
Right.
It's when those movies come in conflict that we have conflict. And in characters, that's what's great. The antagonist and the protagonist are each have a point of view. They see a scene as their scene. This is what I'm here for. This is what I want to accomplish. This is what I need, and this is what I don't want to happen. Both of them have that. But they can't both have that. And so one has to win and one has to lose. That's what storytelling is all about.
And that's how you create antagonists and villains that people sympathize with or understand or...
Sure.
Can't think of the word.
I mean, the number one villain, when they voted heroes and villains, of course, it was Atticus that was the number one hero from To Kill a Mockingbird. The number one villain was Hannibal Lecter. And Hannibal Lecter was evil personified. But he was smart, he was cultured, he knew music, he knew food, he knew wine, he knew literature, he knew all that stuff.
And he had a vulnerability.
And he had a soft spot for Clarice. And there's a scene at the end of Silence of the Lambs where he says, the world's a better place with you, Clarice. And that meant he had a little love for her. That gives him a soft spot, as it were, if you can see one with Hannibal.
Perfect. Okay, so you're a cardiologist.
Correct.
And that's your day job.
Yes.
Okay. And you write nonfiction, and you also helping mystery and crime writers by doing the Q&A questions with a couple of newsletters.
What's it called? The Third Degree, which is the Mystery Writers of America's national thing.
Oh, so it's all
combined. And the Novelists
combined.
Inc., their newsletter. I write what they call the forensic files, where people send me questions.
I've seen that.
I also write fiction. I've got 3 novels out. I got 2 more coming out next July.
Right. Stress Fracture.
Stress Fracture was the first in a new series.
With the one
what I call the Dub Walker series, because he's a forensic expert. The second in that series will be out in June, I think. It's called Hot Lights, Cold Steel, and deals with robotic surgery. And also next June, July, I have the first in a new series, the Royal Pains novels, based on the TV series. And it's going to be called Royal Pains First to Do No Harm.
All right. And you have excerpts and information about your novels, the fiction ones as well, on your website,
all on
the
my
lab,
website,
and your blog.
Yes.
And people can submit questions as well.
Oh, yes.
To you on there, I do believe.
Just go to dplylemd.com. That's my website, and there's a link to the blog, and there's a way to send questions and all that on there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us and taking the time to answer my questions.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.